Hello and welcome to another episode of Stolaroid Stories. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Bree Aesie. Bree is a friend. First of all, she is Canadian, but she's based in Spain. She's a fellow creator. She's a podcaster. She's got a beautiful podcast called Into the Story, which is a podcast for learners of English. If you are a learner of English, I highly recommend that podcast, not because she's a friend of mine, but because I listened to that podcast, and I can tell you, I have never seen, I've never heard anything like that before. I wish all these, creators like Bree were around or had been around when I was a learner of English. So you have no more excuses really to improve your English. Listen to Bree's podcast. But this is to tell you that we are here today, Bree and I are here today to explore creativity, the topic of creativity. Bree has a background in psychology, and we explored the concept of creativity, fear of judgment. Why do we fear putting things out there? Why do we fear of why do we have this fear of being judged, for example? Because now, for example, I'm recording this, but this is something that I couldn't do like 2 years ago, like sitting here speaking in front of, into the camera to someone I don't know maybe, and then uploading the video. That was very, very scary for me. I couldn't do it. But now, now I've uploaded many videos already. So, we talk about this. We talk about the practicing, training our creative muscles. And we talk about productivity. We talk about perfectionism. All these things to hopefully inspire you, hopefully make you reflect on your own creative process, on which is, you don't have to be a content creator, you don't have to be a YouTuber, or you don't need to have a podcast to find these things interesting. Business, for example, is another area where you can apply your creativity. Relationships is a way, establishing relationships is an opportunity to be creative. Like, how do you approach a woman? How do you approach a man? You have to be creative there as well. So anyway, this is to tell you that this conversation is a genuine discussion between two friends who want to explore these topics. We hope, Bree and I hope, you will find it interesting. And that's it. I don't have anything else to say. Enjoy the conversation. Get ready now. It's story time. Hi, Bree.
Hi, Fabio.
Welcome to Stolaroid Stories. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, Bree, you're a friend. We met. Okay, it's already strange to say you're a friend. We met 1 month ago,
but it's true.
It's true. It is true. Mm-hmm. And I know that you studied psychology. You're a creator. You have a beautiful podcast, which I think we will talk about this later. Mm-hmm. And we are here to talk about creativity. We're here to talk about our desire for acceptance, our lives as creators, and maybe we could even inspire other people to put themselves out there and start creating, maybe share more of their work or their lives. Yeah, mm-hmm. we don't know who we're going to inspire or not inspire. So you've got this background as not psychologist, because you're not a psychologist.
I'm not a psychologist. I studied psychology.
Which is different.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, I think what I try to do in my work is bring psychology into it, because a lot of teaching and a lot of creating, I mean, we're constantly thinking about who we're creating for or who we're teaching. And I always love pulling in like evidence-based research to do the things I do. So in that way, that's my background, but I'm definitely not a clinical psychologist.
Okay, but you know much more than me for sure
Maybe.
about how the brain works. When did you start create? So first of all, what do you do when you say the things that I do? What do you mean, like the podcast and your YouTube channel? What do you mean by yeah?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think for me, considering myself a creator feels a bit uncomfortable because perhaps like a lot of people, when I think of a creative person, I think of like Picasso or I don't know, Gaudi, like I think of people who were truly creative and had artistic outputs that we could see. So when I started creating the podcast, I think that is what I would call the most creative thing that I do. And perhaps it's more of a craft than being creative. What I do is interview people on the podcast and they tell a true story. And then I turn that into kind of like a little class. I like it to be an experience for your ears and for your English. So I listen to their story and then I try to put in my own experience. I try to pull out what I think is interesting. So in this way, it's kind of like a craft, right? You're taking something that someone else created, you're kind of cutting it up and you're putting it through your own filter. And I've been doing that since 2020. So 4 years now. I would say that's the start of my creative journey.
Well, first of all, I listened to your podcast 2 weeks ago, and I've already told you this. It's fantastic. Like I think it's one of the best English podcasts I've ever heard because it's really I can feel the passion that you put into it, like the attention to the details, the music, the okay. It's
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you,
Okay,
Fabio. That means a lot, honestly. It's
and
it's like it's a creation of it comes from love for sure. So I'm glad that you can hear my passion in there.
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyways,
it shines through for sure.
thank you.
And the before that, so you started in 2020. So before that, you were not really were you a creator or not?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have called myself that, but looking back on it, I was. So when I'm from Canada originally, and when I arrived in Barcelona in 2010, I continued doing some of my psychology work, which was ABA therapy with people with autism. So that's actual therapy. That's something where you're not really creating, but you are working with people. Then I started teaching. And I really took a lot of that psychology background into teaching. But of course, when you're teaching, you are very creative. You are creating lessons and imagining how it's going to play out in the classroom. So that's absolutely creative, but I wouldn't have called it that. But if you do consider teaching creative, then yeah, I've been teaching since, I guess 2011 I started, and in 2012 opened a school and then was doing more like managing, but also creating programs. But a lot of my work and time was spent on more managing people and business kind of things.
Yeah, business. It's another creative,
Mm-hmm.
um, another creative endeavor. I don't know. Is there a
Yeah.
word?
Yeah. It's another creative endeavor for sure.
Endeavor. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and when we create, or when you create, do you feel that people are watching or are judging what you do or your products, your podcast, your lesson, whatever you create?
That's a good question. It's an interesting question because whenever I, back, so let's say when I was in university, when I had no ideas of being a creative person, that's not what I was focused on. I would see someone who wrote a poem or wrote a song or created a sculpture, and I would think, wow, that's very brave. Like it's very brave to take something that's an idea in your mind and and put it through some sort of process and then show it to other people for them to judge. Because of course, once it leaves you, once you put it out there, it's like completely out of your control. Now, back to your question, do I feel judged? I think maybe the opposite was true when I started. I was like very disconnected from even imagining someone listening to what I created. So I just felt like it was a very like solo endeavor. But now I suppose that a few more people are listening. I am more aware of the audience. And I think I've done enough. I think I've talked to enough people that are smarter than me and more successful than me and read enough books to realize like you just cannot care what people say. And if you care and if it hurts, you can say, okay, thank you. Why don't you go make your, effing art or why don't you write a book or why don't you make a podcast if people are going to be cruel, which is different than people giving you feedback on, hey, I think you could do this better. That's very different. But yeah, definitely. I'm sure you feel the same, Fabio, when you put something out there, you feel, am I going to be judged? It feels kind of scary.
Yeah, for sure. But the more you do it, I feel, the more you do it, the less you care about the judgment.
Yeah. It gets
I don't
easier.
know if it's easier.
It's a practice. That's definitely something that I've learned, that if your goal is to create like a masterpiece. So in my world of audio storytelling, there are certain people that are like the top for me. And if I think, okay, I'm going to create a masterpiece like that creator, like it would never happen, right? Like I never would get there. So instead of obsessing over this masterpiece, you approach it more like a practice. And there's this Canadian author and journalist. His name is Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote
I've read
Outliers.
Talking to Strangers.
Talking to Strangers.
Brilliant book.
Really great book. That one's perhaps a bit more creative than Outliers. Outliers is talking about, so he says, practice isn't the thing you do once you're good. It's the thing that you do that makes you good.
Wow.
Right?
Say it again, please.
Practice isn't the thing that you do once you're good. It's the thing that you do that makes you good. And he has this rule, like the one thing, if anyone who's read Outliers, the one thing that you probably remember, and it's the most talked about, is this concept of 10,000 hours.
So it comes from him.
It comes from Outliers. So like the Beatles, he talks about other people, right? Like the Beatles, they played in Hamburg for a long time before becoming famous. And it's this concept that, yeah, of course you have to have some innate talent or interest or passion for something, but then you have to practice it. And you have to practice it a lot. And this is true of any creative endeavor, or like I just like to say, craft. Like you have to continue doing it. You have to continue practicing it. And done is better than good, right? So when you get obsessed with like perfectionism, just when you get really stuck in that feeling of, okay, I can't do this because it's not going to be a masterpiece, you just done is better than good. Okay. And then next, can keep it moving.
Absolutely. I remember seeing a visual, like an image online by an illustrator, and it was like a diagram that said, put out an idea, and then it divided into two different, it branched out into two different things, and it was like no one liked it and everyone liked it, and then next idea. So it doesn't matter if everyone liked it or no one liked it. As you said, it's the practice that counts. It's not really the product. And it's something that I learned fairly recently by reading a book called The Practice by Seth Godin, where it talks about this. Like if you care more about the outcome, if all you care is the outcome, like I'm going to make a fantastic episode that everyone will like. If that is what you're focusing on, then you lose sight of the practice and you start focusing only on what you're actually on the product, and that
Yeah.
will disrupt the whole creative process.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely true, and it's this idea that how your work is received is totally out of your control, and that's something I think you told me that Seth Godin speaks about, is that focus on what's in your control, the practice, the process, not on the product. Of course, we want to have good products once in a
Yeah,
while, but that cannot be the main thing, or else you just probably would never put anything out there.
yeah. And the more you focus on the practice, then you will find that the product will kind of take care of itself.
Yeah.
That's the magic of it.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that I find helpful, like from a very practical point of view, is something that Alan Watts said, who I believe was a poet, perhaps a British poet. He
Yeah.
said, "I'm always sincere, but never serious." So maybe this doesn't really make sense, but I think it's easy to take life and yourself too seriously, right? And why is serious bad? Well, when we think serious, it creates this feeling of like fear and like, okay, this is important. This is serious. I have to do it well. Put a lot of pressure on. And that makes fear. And when you're feeling fear, you can't be curious, right? And you need, in my opinion, like curiosity is the start of any creative endeavor, or crafting a podcast or writing a piece, or perhaps also creating some sort of physical art. You have to have curiosity of like, oh, what would this look like, or oh, I had this dream, or I wonder what this could be. And when you're being too serious, it's not a space to create. Whereas sincere is about being disciplined, is about making the time and sitting down and doing the practice. So that helps me, like, not so serious, don't hold it so tight. Just be sincere. Be sincere with what you want to create.
And this could apply to so many things, like even as a freelancer. Like, I'm a freelancer, okay? I don't have a full-time job. And you too. I mean, you
Yeah,
opened a school. I think this applies to our business as well, like to business in general. Because business, before I used to think business, money, people who want to scam, like they want to sell you stuff that you don't need. But actually, no. I've completely changed my mind, because business is, wow, it makes you creative. You have to come up with ideas. You have to think about the people you want to help.
yeah.
So and you have to be creative. It's another creative. Let's see if I can say it correctly. Endeavor.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You said it perfectly. That's one of the words that I noticed, that you have a British accent. We spoke a while ago and you told me that you have like a mix of accents. And when I was
Yeah.
editing your story, as I edit your story, I've noticed
A
that you say teacher like an Australian. It's like one of the
teacher.
words that you have, or maybe it's Kiwi. But anyways, sorry. Yeah. So definitely business. Yeah, we need to use curiosity, but again, not be super serious. Yes, be disciplined. Do the work. You're going to have to do a business plan. You're going to have to find product market fit. You're going to have to research the market. You're going to have to do these things. But if we make it feel serious, then that can feel scary.
And you said that you interviewed people who are more successful than you. And what did you learn from them?
Wow, so many. This is one of the best. This is like I don't know what to call it, like the icing on the cake of my job, is that, I mean, first of all, I do love stories. I love hearing stories, but then I get to speak to people about different facets of life, sometimes related to their story, sometimes not. So one that comes to mind is the first Canadian to summit Everest. Okay, his name was Laurie Skreslet. And I mean, he would be very upset with me if I said he's more successful than I am, because he's a very humble person and he's super supportive of me and my work. But he's someone who took a really big goal and made it a reality with a lot of other things, with teamwork, with focusing on strategy and skill and hard work. But I've learned so many different things from so many different people. One thing that Lori, the first Canadian to summit Everest, did teach me that I always repeat to myself when I get stuck in a creative endeavor. And it's something that he said. He's going, so in his story, he's like at camp 4 or something, which is like right near the summit. It's like 4 a.m. It's like -50. He has to leave his tent and go search for a few climbers who are lost. So this is like a high stress situation, but he says that he finds peace in movement. He said, I find peace in movement. So instead of sitting in your tent thinking what's going to happen, he like puts on all of his gear and gets out. And the fact of stepping forward, taking a decision, doing an action, he finds peace in this. So I always come back to this if I'm feeling stuck on a story. Instead of being like, okay, I don't know where to go, I just sit down at my computer or I open my booklet and I start writing something. Or literally, if I'm really stuck, I actually move my body. I go for a walk. And this concept, it's like this mantra that I have, like peace and movement. Instead of sitting and being stuck, move yourself. If he can do it in like -50, then I can do it, in plus 25 in Barcelona. So yeah, I've learned so many things. Mm-hmm.
And do you know the science behind moving your body and coming up with ideas? Because many of the biggest ideas that I've had, like I'm thinking about the idea for my book, it came while I was running, and many of the things that I write online are things that come to me unexpectedly, like out of the blue while I'm running.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know anything about the science of this, or?
Well, basically, humans, we search for things that feel good. Like we know that, right? Like chocolate,
Constantly.
or any of the other things that you can think of that are pleasurable, you are moving towards that. And in our brains, when we release different neurotransmitters like dopamine or serotonin or oxytocin or endorphins, right? When you're running, you're releasing endorphins. We know that when we do exercise, we release endorphins. This makes us feel good. Yeah. So if while you're running, you feel good, and then you're going to return to those activities. But perhaps when we're getting energy moving, it also just helps us clear our brains more. That I don't know the specifics on why is it then that while we're moving, we're feeling inspired. I get most of my best ideas while I'm walking in the mountains. That's my equivalent of your run, perhaps. I like to go hiking just here by my house.
In Barcelona?
I live just up the coast from Barcelona, just 20 minutes from the center. The whole area is called Maresma. I don't know if you know. So it's like a mountain. Well, they call it a mountain. It's not a mountain. I'm sorry. I'm Canadian. It's not a mountain, but it's like a
that's why I was thinking, is she in Canada now? Or
it's like it's like a steep hill, and then right there is the sea. And I live just on that little hill. So it's a very privileged spot where I can go just out my house and walk up. It's like a 40-minute walk. Yeah. But I definitely notice the same. Perhaps it's the fresh air. We're seeing different things. We're just keeping ideas moving. I don't know.
It's a beautiful thing, and I'm lucky that I would never live in the city. Like I'm 20 kilometers from Milan. Yeah. And every time I go to Milan, I'm like, wow, yes, thank God I have to stay here like for a couple of hours, and then I'll go back to my provincial little town surrounded by fields.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah. And you're from Canada, which is like only trees, I guess.
Trees and igloos. No one lives there. No, it's true. I mean, I grew up in a place where there's just not a lot of people, right? You have a lot of nature And we know this. We know that being in nature, seeing green, touching a tree, I mean, I am a little bit like this, okay? But there's real evidence that when we are able to stare at the sea or stare at a tree or the mountains, it does release these feel-good hormones and neurotransmitters. We know that it's good for us. It's good for our state of mind. It's good to feel less anxiety. It lowers cortisol levels in our body. So yeah, when I go to the city, I feel the same. I suppose if you live there, and I'm sorry, because a lot of people live in cities, and there are city people, right, that like the city.
Yeah.
But when I go, I just feel stressed. Maybe it's because I'm not used to it. But
Me too.
Everyone walking around, not looking at each other, not saying hi, lost in their own world. I find it a little bit disconnected. Yeah.
And is this why we have the lizard brain? Like, what we have this, I don't know what it is really. I know that the lizard brain, it comes from the name comes from the animal, the lizard. But is this, what is the lizard brain? This is my question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, the lizard brain is essentially some different structures that we have back here, right back. If you put your hand at the back of your head, right? So this part of your brain is responsible for the most primitive actions that we have.
Like eating.
So, like eating, like in this case, feeling fear. That would be a big one that comes up when I think of the lizard brain and like creating. What we want to be using is like the prefrontal cortex, which is that part of your brain, like behind, if you put your hand on your forehead, which is responsible for planning and more deep thought. Whereas the lizard brain is more those primitive feelings of fear. And if we think, I'm not an evolutionary psychologist, but if we think of what our ancestors, what was important to them, right? Like, did they have to be accepted by a group in order to survive? Yes. You could not, be a digital nomad and live alone somewhere. You had to be part of a group. So if your ideas were not accepted, if what you were creating and putting out there wasn't popular, that could be potentially dangerous. So this part of the lizard brain, it can easily kind of come up and take over our thoughts when we're thinking about creating. Like, it can be scary. Putting something out there, you could be afraid that you have no talent. You could be afraid that you'd be rejected. You could be afraid that people would criticize your work or disagree with your work. You could be afraid that your ideas are not original. That's not something that we've talked about yet, but I think a lot of people are afraid, like, what if I'm not original? You could be afraid that you're too old to create. You could be afraid that you're too young to create. I mean, there's just so many. I could continue on and on. The things that our lizard brain could tell us, and reasons to not put something out there. But I also believe that for anyone who does create, they'll say that it enriches their lives. It makes it better. It makes it more fulfilling to put things out there that you honestly believe, as long as what you are putting out there is honest and is authentic. Because if it's not, that's a bit different. And we're seeing a lot of that now, right? People putting versions of themselves out there that they think they should. Just because, that's a very complex topic, but you and I have both seen that. I'm sure anyone has seen people who are out there not being authentic, and that probably doesn't feel good. But,
and is this, you said that the process of creating makes your life better. How does that apply to you? Like, how has your life got better by creating?
That's a question that requires deep thought, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I
don't expect you to answer.
No, I will. I'll definitely answer. I'll definitely answer. Let me think about it. I haven't thought about it before. It's kind of just been like, yeah, this makes me feel better. I remember when I was teaching, and I was teaching at an academy that I opened, that I co-founded, right? So it's like I was quite in control of the process. But I was creating classes that were following a model that I didn't agree with, that I didn't believe in a structure, having 8 students and 1 teacher, and, PPP model where you're presenting the information. Anyways, all this teaching stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I would create those classes and I would put so much into it. And every time I would let a little bit of the self of myself that I now use in the podcast come out of, wanting to dig into topics of self-development and, oh, where does this idea go? Every time I would do that, I would feel like, oh, I'm wasting time. And I would more stick to what I should be doing. So after each of those classes, I had a feeling like, oh, that was so not satisfying. And like, it just felt lost. I can't explain it. I don't know. It was like disappointing for me. I mean, I think my students were happy, but I felt disappointed. So I think to answer your question, now when I put out a podcast episode, and I put a lot of work into them, it's a lot, it's a long process, and that's a whole other thing. But often when I'm creating the episode and I'm getting towards the end, it actually feels like there's always a moment. Just to backtrack, there's a moment when you're giving birth to a human. Okay, I won't go into the details, but there's a moment called transition where you're like very close to the baby being born. And it's a moment where women can go like completely crazy, like really dark thoughts, lots of adrenaline, like, oh my God, I can't do this, like freaking out. Okay. It's
After
not a
birth, after
before,
giving birth,
right before.
before. Okay.
Okay. And it's this moment where if you read about it and you actually then go and give birth, you're like, okay, I'm freaking out. That probably means I'm close. That's really similar to what it is for
Releasing an episode.
Releasing episode, or I'm sure anyone who's written a book, I'm sure it's the same, where you are in like your darkest hour. You're like, all of my ideas are just terrible, and like I hate this and I can't do this. But then the idea is born, the creative thing is born, and it's there, and you're like, that is so satisfying. And it's so different than doing work. For me, teaching a class in a model that I just never felt right, compared to putting something out there that it's good, it's bad, you like it, you don't, but it's what I think is good and it's really authentically part of me. That is very satisfying.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that makes my life better.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Sorry,
I
took you down like telling you about my old job, telling you about like giving birth to my babies. I took you all through that process, but that's what I can say. It's just
perfect
satisfying.
Perfect story. Yeah, it's do you think this is why so many people now want to be creators? Like the creator economy these days is huge. Like there are YouTubers, podcasters, people writing on Medium, and I'm one of those. And I like the big corporations. It seems, I don't have any data here, but it seems that people don't want a normal job anymore, or many people at least don't want a normal job anymore, where you have to follow the instructions and be there at a certain time and do what you're told.
Mm-hmm.
When you can be in your own house doing this. Well, we're not going to get paid by YouTube. I mean, I'm still too small for that. But still, it's really creativity at work. Like it's me. I decide who to talk to, what videos, what articles, what products. So I'm independent.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I feel, it's because it's probably because it's creativity that it's the creativity that comes with this that makes me want to do it.
I think in your case it is. And I can say in my case it is. I don't do what I do to be wealthy. And I don't do what I do because I want to be famous.
No.
I do what I do because, like I said, it just makes my life feel better. I don't know. It sounds very earnest and silly, but it is true. But I think perhaps there's a lot of other, like, we can't speak about all of this without speaking about vanity and narcissism, right? So the people who are, what side of what you said do you want to go into? Do you want to go into that all of us want to be creators now, which I don't actually agree with, because I think a lot of people maybe will jump into this space for a little bit, but will retreat when they see that there's nothing secure about it. Like, no one's going to tell you did good. Nobody's going to tell you what deadlines you have. Nobody's going to pay you permanently. And I'm not trying to say for people not to go into this work at all. I mean, it's the opposite. But I think a lot of people still are very comfortable with regular paychecks and a boss to tell them, check, you did good.
Yeah,
so there's that.
Absolutely.
And then there's this other idea that, are people going into it to be creative and as a creative outlet, or are people going into it because they want to show off and have other people like them?
Okay. Well, you don't leave your job and say, okay, I'm a YouTuber now. Bye-bye, boss. From today, I'm going to open a YouTube channel. That's not how it works. You can still be creative and treat whatever you create as a hobby. I don't live, YouTube doesn't pay my bills. My podcast doesn't pay my bills. What pays my bills is the teaching that I do in universities and the freelance writing that I do for other companies. So I don't have a permanent job. I don't have a 9-to-5 job, which I have nothing against. And I do this because, as you said, it makes me think, it makes me create, okay, which in turn makes me creative, because that's my definition of creativity. I still have to think about it, but a creative person is a person who creates something that wasn't there before. Doesn't have to be original, so we can go into this too. So what am I saying now?
I think that at this point in the conversation, we could, if you want, we can talk about originality. I think it is an interesting topic, and when we're speaking about being creative. I mean, I don't know about for you, but if I ever want to focus, like if I approached my work like I want to create something original, then that would feel very forced. Like it would not feel authentic, because there's this quote from Dorothy Parker, and she said, "Creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye." So creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye. So wildness is like filling your mind with everything and anything you see. So like something that Fabio said in a post, and then something my kid said at the park, and then something I saw on a walk in the mountains. Okay. And then getting this huge, big collection of ideas, but then having the discipline to be able to see the connections in between them in a way that feels fresh and different. It's like specifically a lot of the work you do, and I've said this to you before, I love your writing. I love the ideas that you put out there. A lot of them are very authentic. A few of them are perhaps original. But what I think you're really good at is, I know you're a voracious reader. You read a lot. You take in a lot of ideas, and then you put it together in a way that's really authentic because it feels fresh and different to me. Whereas if you just focus on, okay, I need to have original ideas, and no, Seth Godin said that, I can't say that. Okay, I can't say this because so-and-so, because Malcolm Gladwell said it. No, that's ridiculous. If all of us, if all humans were focusing on being original, we would get nowhere. there would be no innovation.
It's very
Because in
hard.
order for there to be innovation, you need to stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say. You need to take what people did before you and then mix it up in your mind and make it something fresh and different. So not originality. Don't obsess over originality, because authenticity is far more impactful and meaningful, and I think satisfying.
Yeah. And it's very hard to, like we said before, the practice. If you focus on the practice, then the outcome will come. So if you focus on thinking, gathering ideas, observing, then kind of automatically you will come up with something original. But if you focus on, as you said, well, I need to be original. Okay, I'm going to open LinkedIn now and I'm going to say something original. It doesn't work like this.
And anyone who's been on, well, LinkedIn is an interesting one because everyone wants to start conversations and have the ideas, right? But yeah, it's just, I don't know of any original ideas out there. And I think any honest author or thought leader is going to give credit where credit's due to all of the creative, amazing people who came before us. But again, coming back to this idea of holding on to the practice and focusing on thinking in the practice, there's something that you speak about in your work. And I know with writers specifically, that is, well, these other ideas that we talked about to keep ideas moving, right? Going for a walk, all of this. But something that I find useful is using ChatGPT or any AI model to keep ideas flowing. So like we know that ChatGPT is a mediocre writer at best. Like it's not ever going to be better than a good writer. But it's a really interesting way of almost speaking out loud to yourself and then getting some feedback that you can agree with or disagree with, or that could actually be a complete lie. Let's be clear here. But it keeps the ideas flowing through your mind. So even like speaking, if you want to do that, if you're into that, like speaking to AI and asking it questions, or speaking out loud and what do you think? Or if you were Malcolm Gladwell, what would you respond to this? You know, like just not to give yourself ideas, but to not to prevent your ideas from getting stuck. What do you think about this idea?
I've never really used it in this way because sometimes I feel that this may prevent you from thinking, but I've never tried it. I've never used it in this way. So wouldn't it be better to talk to a friend?
Definitely.
So I call you and say, okay, Bree, what do you think about this idea? Or I'm thinking of creating this thing. What do you think? I think, but you don't have all the data that ChatGPT has.
I don't think ChatGPT is as smart as Fabio. I don't. But ChatGPT is available at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon when Fabio is teaching.
Yeah.
And I have this idea now, or I'm stuck now. So I'm not talking about saying, hey, make this whatever, and then taking that and copy and pasting. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm saying treating it like a light conversation with a friend when you can't have a conversation with the friend, as a tool that you can use right now, whenever, on demand.
Yeah.
It's just it's something that I've found useful.
Yeah.
Like speaking out loud, because I find speaking out loud really helpful. But then getting kind of answers that's like, oh, that's interesting, or oh, I wonder if that's true. And then maybe running it through a friend or speaking out about it with someone else.
Yeah, I think when it comes to AI, I mean, I've said this many times, it's just a tool. So it's just like money, like guns. Like a gun can be a fantastic tool if we talked about this in your podcast. I think if you're running in the woods of Canada and you meet a bear and you're about to die because the bear attacks you, but you have a gun, well, in that case, it's a brilliant tool that you want to have. But if you use it to kill another person or to, for any other criminal endeavor. I don't know.
Endeavor. I just want to use that word. You said it perfectly.
Yeah. Well, in that case, no, it's not it's the use of the tool. It's not the tool
Exactly.
itself. So ChatGPT, ChatGPT is ChatGPT. So it's how you use it that may affect your thinking, or it may benefit or harm your thinking. So
Yeah.
if it works for you, well, I don't see why you shouldn't do it. I've never tried it in this way. I've never used it in this way. I use it more for mechanical kind of tasks, like remove all the bullet points in this list,
Yeah.
or for micro editing. Like, is this sentence? Do I need a comma here? This kind of
Right.
things. Yeah. So ChatGPT, we were talking about ChatGPT. There's something else that you said. I don't know. Do you want to add anything to this, or because
I mean, this concept of keeping ideas flowing, of course, for micro editing. There was a study that came out, I think it was in 2019, so it was before actually most of us were aware and were widely using AI in our day to day. But this is just an interesting finding from this study, was that profiles, I think they did this with Airbnb profiles. That was their sample, but it was just people reading something. When people perceived something to be written by AI, they trusted it way less when they perceived it to be written by a human, or even a mix of human and AI. So this is definitely something that's relevant for anyone writing. Please don't write something and then put it in ChatGPT and say, make this better, because it won't. It will make it just not written by a human, and you can see it. And I think all of us are now getting a feel for, oh, that's totally ChatGPT, right? When you just see something, it just lacks a human feeling. Anyways.
It's absolutely true. The concept of vanity, the lizard brain. I wanted to ask you, what can we do to not to kill the lizard brain, but when we feel, because this applies also to speaking a foreign language, right? You and I are both teachers, and we don't want to. I mean, students, I'm sure you've seen many. They don't want to make mistakes. They are afraid of speaking in front of other people. I was afraid when I was learning English.
Yeah.
And is this the lizard brain again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anytime we're feeling that fear, and so fear comes from adrenaline, cortisol, these things that are running through our body, making us feel this. So for me, when I get very afraid, my mouth goes dry, my tongue can go numb. Sometimes if you're very afraid, you can, like, your hearing changes. So all of this is like a very physical reaction in your body that's being caused by your brain telling you, you are in trouble now. You need to fight or run, right? Fight or flight. We know that this is what the lizard brain is making us do. So I would say that 98% of the people I have taught and I've spoken to, myself included, they are like us. Like, I was afraid to speak. I would avoid speaking in Spanish when I first moved here. And I still avoid speaking in Catalan, which is the language here, right? Even though I can, I don't, because I'm afraid. Now, how do we get better at this? So how do we not kill, but quiet the lizard brain from telling us, like, you are in trouble, do not speak this Catalan sentence? We just need to practice. It's the same as creativity. Like, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable to speak another language. And I think it comes back to this evolutionary part of ourselves where we want to be accepted by the group. And if we're speaking a language and we think in our minds, I'm going to sound stupid, I'm not going to say this correctly, I'm going to whatever. A lot of us can say these things to ourselves when we're speaking another language. then our brain is like, okay, this is not safe. I'm not going to be accepted. Don't do this. And most of us, we listen to that and we say, okay, I'll just not say anything, or I'll get my partner to speak for me, or whatever it is. But the only way to get through that is to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
And your podcast, the episodes that you create, how do you know when the episode is ready? So how do you know when you must stop editing? Because also I see it in my writing. Over editing is just it's just perfectionism.
Yeah.
It's the lizard brain again.
It definitely.
Yeah. How do you know, okay, that's it? I cannot go on another hour editing and making things better, because most of the times, well, sometimes these things are the things that we think people will notice. They will not, because they're just in our brain.
Yeah, you're right. You're definitely right. I think a lot of people probably understand that feeling no matter what you do, knowing when to stop. The first thing I'll say is deadlines are your friend. So I know when to stop because I literally run out of time.
Oh, so you have a timer? You use a time?
No, like I have a deadline, like I need to release this in the morning. I wish I had a timer and I was very organized. But often I edit until my process, it's like a 10-step process and I have to move myself through. I know it takes me 5 days from once I have the recorded interview to turn an episode out, in terms of writing the introduction, the narration, in terms of putting the final editing together, music, and then all of the website and all of that other stuff. It just takes 5 days. It's a long process. Then creating the materials that go along with it. But back to your point about how to know if you're over editing. I listened to, there's someone in like the audio storytelling space that's like super famous, like superstar, is Ira Glass, who's the host of This American Life.
Oh yeah, very famous podcast. Yeah,
very famous podcast. He's a journalist, and he very generously explains his process. Not only his process, but also the process of This American Life, which has changed an entire generation of audio storytelling. And there's a podcast called Sound School. And he speaks about, he has like a manifesto kind of thing where he explains, like, I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this. And he comes back to it all the time where he says something along the lines of, do you have to touch this piece of audio? Like, do you have to put a little slice there? Do you have to do it? Is it absolutely necessary? If it's not, don't touch it. Try, and also saying that most of us, when we are listening to our own voice, our automatic feeling is, okay, edit that out. And in my early episodes, I often, there's none of me at all. It's just the storyteller and then me recording afterward. And now what I'm trying to do more is listen to Ira Glass saying, no, your real-time response to what that person said, that very authentic, being curious or thinking it's funny or thinking whatever, that is what people connect to. So when you over edit, sometimes you just edit the life out of something and it just has no soul. So for me, it's just trying to resist the urge to edit. I try to do limited. And I found that in a lot of different things. When you get involved in trying to manipulate a process, can be, with health, for example, if you don't need to do a surgery, don't do it. Don't mess around with that. I mean, that's true of so many different things. So that's what I try to do, is just leave it if I can. And of course, deadlines. You have to have super strict deadlines. Now I'm trying to be more, get ahead of my schedule. So I have them ready months in advance, but being very clear on checklist. Okay, I had to do that by today. Done. So I get that little bit of dopamine, that feel good. Okay, I did this, check. And I can feel like I'm moving forward.
Yeah, this is another thing that I often think about. Why do I feel good at the end of a very productive day? and I don't feel good. I feel bad when I haven't been productive. And I thought, why do I feel like this? Why is it that, okay, my to-do list is, I've checked everything on the to-do list, and still sometimes I've checked everything and I still want to, okay, what should I do now? What's next?
Mm-hmm.
Do you
plan? Like for me, my measure of success is, did I accomplish what I decided I wanted to do yesterday? Like, so I always try to have my to-do list for the week ahead, like say 4 big things that I want to accomplish on Friday afternoon. I try to have that done. So like my measure of success for next week will be getting these things done. It could be just one thing as well. Depends on how big your things are.
have you already planned the following week, like next week?
I mean, now, because I am running, like now I have a month before my schedule is totally upset. That's just a way of saying that my kids are going to be out of school for the summer.
Yoo-hoo. Okay.
Yoo-hoo. So I have to be, now I know for the next 4 weeks exactly what I have to do.
Okay.
And I find that if is what I'm doing today going to make future Bree happy? If it's yes, then good. If it's not, then probably not. If I'm just spending my time putting out fires and responding to things I don't need to respond to, or, I should just ignore things. But I find it very helpful to have those lists written out well in advance.
But why do you feel happy when you complete those tasks? Like,
what is the satisfaction?
Yeah. Why?
I don't know. I mean, it probably has to do with something that feels good. Why does it feel good to do what you should do? I don't know. I guess it's just that human urge to have a purpose and to feel like you're doing the right thing.
But not everyone is like this. Like I know lazy people who, they don't have a to-do list. They just live the day. Wouldn't that be better? I don't know.
Yeah, but what if, I guess it comes back to this, if you want to be a creative person, if that's something that is interesting to you, you have to be disciplined. When we all have this idea in our minds of like the creator, and they're like totally chaotic, very messy house. There's no schedule, right? But I guess in the reality of being a digital creator, like, we know that you need to have a regular release schedule. You need to look like you have your stuff together, or else no one will care what you do, unless you're like a genius, right? Of course, there are people like that, but I think it's just necessary. We know that in order to, again, like this, okay, I need to focus on the practice. And what is the practice? Well, the practice is getting these things done. That's like my only scale for how I'm doing. Because if I'm not just caring about the output and how many people liked my episode or bought my course, yes, those things are important, but if I'm just focusing on what can I control, not all the things I can't control, then it feels good. It feels like you're being successful if you completed the few things on your to-do list. And I think when you don't have a boss to tell you, hey, Fabio, hey, Bree, good job. Here's a bonus of whatever, euros. When you don't have that, you need to focus on things that you can control completing.
Would this be the number one tip you would give to any new person anyone who wants to start something creative online, like a podcast, a blog, or a YouTube channel? Would this be your number one tip? My number one tip would be, I can tell you.
Yeah, tell me.
It might take a very long time before someone says, "Wow, I like this."
Yeah.
It might take a very long time, and if you approach this new creative, again, I'm going to say it again, endeavor by thinking that tomorrow everyone will like your thing, or maybe next month, because many people quit and we don't hear from those people. We hear from the big creators, like the big podcasters, but I wrote this actually in a blog post. If you go to a YouTube channel of a very, very successful creator, and
Yeah.
you remember that?
But
You
say,
click on oldest on YouTube. If you go to on YouTube and you click, there are 3 tabs, and you click on oldest, you will see that the very first videos were frankly terrible,
yeah.
like
And it makes you feel so
rudimental.
good.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I said, and it makes you feel good. It
makes
makes
you
you
feel
feel
good.
like, okay,
They focused on the practice.
yes. And I mean, of course, if you focus on the practice, you also do need to have things that make you feel good. We
Yeah.
spoke about this before, that you need, so dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin, all of these things that are going through our brains when we feel good, we need to attach that to our creative process in order for us to return to it. So I wish I could give you a takeaway.
Well, you've
But
already
you need to
given me
find,
many.
but you need to, you need to find things that feel good for you. Like, is it really satisfying for you to go into your project management tool and tick like done? Because all of these softwares, they know that if there's, a little sound, or like it crosses it out or whatever, or you stop the timer, like that gives you a little kick of dopamine that feels good and you want to go back to it. I think if I had to give one takeaway, because you already gave the practice one, it would be this thing that we spoke about earlier of the creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye. That
Observe.
observe, listen, and don't think that it's not worthwhile. Right? Like everything that you are experiencing is going to eventually come out in your work. And you're not responsible to be original. You just need to put it out there in a more fresh and different way. And then, yes, be disciplined. Don't be serious. Be sincere. And sit down and practice.
Great. Well, with that, I think your podcast is a brilliant example of human creativity, passion, and practice.
Thanks, Fabio.
Creative practice. So, where can people find this masterpiece?
This masterpiece. Well, you tell a story in the podcast. It's a masterpiece. I love the story. And they can
Thanks.
listen to that story. It'll be coming out in the summer of 2024. So you can send them there. But yeah, you can find Into the Story anywhere you listen to podcasts. And please subscribe. And if you like it, then I would love to hear it.
Yeah, most of my listeners actually are from Spain.
Really?
I think it's 25% of my listeners are come from Spain. On Spotify, at least. On YouTube, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there we go. I don't know.
Local
Why am I
people.
saying this? Because you're based in Spain.
It's like when I tell people I'm from Canada, people are like, do you know David? I'm like, no, I don't know David. David from
Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like the joke. It's like a silly joke. We are like, I think we're 40 million people now, but it is a relatively small country compared to, what's the population of Italy?
Almost 70 million.
Okay.
70 million people, yeah. In Spain, it's about the same.
I think it's 45. Maybe
okay.
More. Yeah.
Okay, more Italians than Spanish people. All right. That's a brilliant way to close this podcast. Thank you, Bree.
Thank you, Fabio.
Really, very interesting. Thank you so much.
It was lovely speaking and catching up with a friend, an old friend.
An old friend. Fantastic. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, we're back. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope you found, something that made you reflect, something that, okay, maybe I'm going to try that, or I'll stop thinking about that thing, or I'll stop obsessing about that thing. Something like this, just a thought. This is This is enough. If you want to contribute to this discussion, please let me know in the comments. Let us know in the comments. If you want to say anything about creativity, how you approach creativity, what are your fears, for example, all these things. And I have a a private email list called Better Writers. Is a private email list where I help non-native English writers. If you want to join, I share tips, experiences, stories, books, books recommendations, and the link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.